Back in 2021, I named Dune Part 1 my favourite film of the year. And even though it was the same year that Julia Ducournau's Titan was released, I still have no regrets about that. It was a masterfully executed science fiction epic, but it was only half a film. And so, like everyone else, I have been eagerly anticipating returning to Arrakis to finish off what had started out with such promise. Dune Part 2 is not quite as good as its first half, and it certainly has more flaws. The hype for this has been slightly inflated. I mean, come on people, this is not as good as High and Low. But when Dune Part 2 hits, it hits hard. And I can certainly say I left the cinema very satisfied with the full 5 hour and 20 minutes of what I'm sure will be considered classic science fiction cinema. Villeneuve returns to this sequel with the same inspired direction as before. The colours and sweeping tableaus of the desert are as grand as ever, while his more intimate shooting of faces is, if anything, the highlight of getting to see this on such a big screen. The unique designs of Frank Herbert's world elevate this film to an entirely different level than most big budget blockbusters. They're outlandish and epic, but feel entirely based in an actual reality, with the film's excellent world building pulling you into a science fiction universe of such an alien quality that at times it crosses over into flat out fantasy. The art direction is at its strongest in the sequences on Getty Prime, and man, my jaw was on the floor for all of these. The H.R. Giger influences are all too apparent, and by extension the influence of Alejandro Jodorowsky's unmade version of Dune, which was eventually handed over to Lynch after it became clear that this version would have probably sunk the studio. Villeneuve is threading an intricate line here on the Harkonnen homeworld, attempting to remove the problematic queer coding of the characters while not entirely straight-washing them either. Whether he succeeds or not is not for me to say, but I always appreciate these intelligent attempts at modernization like this. As this is the second half of the story, there are a fair few more action sequences in this than there were in part 1. Some of these are epic, with highlights including those on Getty Prime, as well as the film's final moments. Some of the smaller scale sequences in the film's first movement, however, lack any proper punch, with the weight and power of the machinery and weapons being lost in the all too familiar spectacle of actors running while a green screen explosion happens behind them. Dune was never about gunfights and explosions though, and the movie's grand ideas remain as its central power. Galactic politics are what drives the plot, but the film's religious allegory and commentary is what makes it so interesting. This anti-religion commentary is intelligent and nuanced. It does not decry the Fremen for their beliefs, but rather those who have thought to manipulate them using religion, and their naivety for thinking that there was no chance of this plan spiraling out of control. Javier Bardem's character functions as an excellent representation of religious confirmation bias, at times played for laughs in what I'm sure was a knowing reference to Monty Python's The Life of Brian, but others with a mix of both understanding but also overt disapproval. The film plays as almost a parody of fantasy tropes and white savior narratives. It's saying if there really was some well-meaning kid with a prophecy surrounding him, this is probably what would actually happen, and also maybe let's think a little harder about religious doctrine and leadership, shall we? The new cast members for Part 2 all fit excellently into this world, with the highlight for me being Austin Butler's performance, who very bravely managed to stop doing the Elvis voice in order to craft a very three-dimensional antagonist. He may not have much screen time, but he sure as hell was memorable. As I feared from Part 1, Zendaya is the weak link in the cast. And I didn't believe much of what she said, though her character serves a very important thematic purpose. I haven't seen Euphoria, and I hear she's very good in that, but from what I've seen of her film roles, I'm still not convinced she can actually act. This extends to her and Timothée Chalamet's romance in the film, which is unconvincing to say the least. In fairness to Zendaya though, this is not her fault. The two have no chemistry, the script is shoddy, and clearly Villeneuve isn't even sure how to make it work either. Neither actor can pull it off, and it takes up a decent amount of the film's first third. One of Part 1's greatest strengths was its pacing. It's half a film only. It was 1.5 acts long exactly, and took 2.5 hours to progress to what for most films takes under an hour. Yet it was consistently brisk without feeling overstuffed. It's an amazing feat of editing and screenwriting, and was a large part of why that movie worked so well. Part 2 is still expertly paced. However, despite clocking in at almost 2 hours and 50 minutes, if anything, the film could have been a little longer. There's plenty more politics going on outside of Arrakis, and I would have loved this to have been expanded upon while not cutting anything out of Paul's journey with the Fremen. I'm starting to see why Alejandro Jodorowsky felt he needed 9 hours to tell this story. Finally, Zimmer's score matches the immense quality of his work for Part 1, standing as one of the prolific composer's top 5 works. He's playing around here even more with huge rhythms and industrial metal, and though there are a few moments moments of generic Hans Zimmer music here, there were moments of immense power that noticeably amplified the film's emotional resonance, which is exactly what a good score should do. Laurie Coulter's vocals may be highly memeable, but they're also from another world. They're hair-raising, and I felt her command every time Zimmer and Villeneuve decided to accent a part of the film with them. The 2021 and 2024 adaptation of the first Dune novel is finally complete, and Villeneuve and company can hold their heads high having filmed this unfilmable novel. Part 2 may be a little messier than its preceding half, but it's a conclusion that lives up to the excellent first half, which I adored so much. I'm aware that the next book in the series is controversial, but I can't help but feel that we are not yet done on Arrakis. And I hope, perhaps after returning to a smaller Incendies or Prisoners type film, Villeneuve returns to this universe which he has crafted with such care and detail. And I'm giving Dune Part 2 an 8 out of 10. For reference, Part 1 is a 9, and taken together, this is almost certainly quite a high 8. So what did you think of Dune 2? As always, let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please consider tipping me on Ko-Fi. The link is in the description, and also in the description is the link to my podcast, the Extreme Cinema Podcast. Thank you so much for watching this video. Please like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you all next time.